Today we are making the smoothest chocolate cremeux with a foolproof recipe. Cremeux has an incredibly silky texture that just melts on the tongue, and it tastes absolutely amazing in any kind of pastry. It's ideal to use in fillings for example, macarons, as decoration on top of petit fours, or inside an entremet cake as an insert. I personally mostly bake petit fours and entremet cakes, so for me that's how I use it, but there's really no limit to how you can use cremeux. Before we get started, let's talk a bit about what cremeux actually is. A cremeux is a crème anglaise added chocolate, and a crème anglaise is usually made out of sugar, egg yolks and cream, which is why a cremeux is very velvety, silky, smooth, and has this very melts on the tongue texture. Whereas if you compare it to a ganache that only is made out of cream and chocolate, it gives a more dense and fudgy consistency, which is great for as an insert into cakes, for example, but it's usually too thick to pipe, whereas a cremeux has the perfect, silky, smooth texture to actually pipe on top of creams, but also to be used as a filling. For this cremeux recipe, I am using 250 grams of milk chocolate, 4 egg yolks, 20 grams of sugar, a bit of sea salt, 320 milliliters of heavy cream, and 1.5 sheets of gelatin. I start out by soaking the gelatin in cold water for 5 to 10 minutes. The next thing I'm going to do is to melt the chocolate in this pan. You can also use a water bath if you're more comfortable with that, but I just prefer doing this. I just do it at a low heat to make sure that the chocolate doesn't get too hot. So I'm just gonna put it on now at very low heat. If you don't use a water bath but just the pan like me, just make sure to stir it a lot, because if the chocolate gets too hot, it's basically brewing, then you need to use another batch. So rather be careful here. Now that the chocolate is all melted, I'm gonna pour it in a bowl and put this aside. I'm now taking another bowl where I quickly will mix the sugar with egg yolks with an electric whisker. And it's not supposed to be whisked like a lot, but just so it's very briefly combined. Just very briefly like this, so the two things are combined. Then we also put this bowl aside, and we're gonna use the whisker again, so don't put that too far away. The next step is to heat up the cream now. So I'm pouring it in the pan. And this should just only be heated onto a boil, to the boiling point, so not fully boiling, but just slightly simmering or just before simmering. We don't want to make it too hot because we're gonna pour this hot cream over the mixture with the eggs and the sugar we just made. And if this one is too hot, we're gonna make scrambled eggs, and we want to avoid that. So I'm keeping it at a lower heat to make sure that it doesn't get too hot. Now I can see it's just almost the boiling point. So I'm taking it off the heat, putting this to the side. And then I'm taking here the bowl with the sugar and egg mixture. I'm going to pour the hot cream over the egg mixture while I mix at the same time, just at a low speed. And again, it's just very briefly, it's really just to combine, so don't over mix it, just until it's combined. Then we are pouring the hot cream back in the pan. And then we are gonna heat this on the stove very carefully until exactly 83 degrees. You wanna do this at a very low heat because if we have it too hot, you will make scrambles because there is a lot of egg in this mixture, and that's not what we want in our cremeux. So make sure to stir it a lot. By doing this, you need the thermometer to check the temperature because we want to heat it to exactly 83 degrees. And this is very important because if you have it at a lower or higher temperature than that, it's not going to be tempered, meaning that the texture is going to be different. It might be too fluid, it might split, or if you use it in certain silicone molds, it might not come out of the mold if it's not tempered correctly. So here you really need to pay attention. So just keep a close eye. I can see mine is now 69 degrees. And I stir it all the time because we don't want to make scrambles. 75. Actually, I'm going to take one down. Rather too low heat than too high. Because this is a step that you don't want to rush it. Exactly this with the tempering. Now it's 82 degrees, so one more. And here we have. So now it has a temperature of 83 degrees. To make sure we don't have any clumps in our crème anglaise, which is this one, I here have a small sift and a bowl because we're just going to strain it to make sure, because there will sometimes still, even despite having been careful with temperature, there will be a bit of egg excess in it. So this is what we are doing here. Straining, you can see there is a bit of excess, and this is okay. That's why we use the sift. In this mixture, we're now gonna add the gelatin that's been soaked in the cold water. I just squeeze the water out of the gelatin, and we're gonna add it here to our hot cream. So you can see we have this like smooth cream that has like a very airy, creamy consistency from the eggs. We're now gonna pour the hot cream over the chocolate that we melted earlier. And while pouring, you want to make sure you use a rubber spatula to run around the middle like this. And don't make too big movements because this can create extra air bubbles. We want to make sure we have it all. So we stir it like this. You can see it's starting to combine and come together and get this like glossy, shiny surface. And that's what you want. You can see now you have this consistency. To get an extra creamy consistency of the cremeux, I will use a hand blender as the last step. So I'm pouring the cremeux into a plastic pitcher. Before we start to blend, I will add just a pinch here of sea salt. That's going to be blended into the cremeux as well. So I'm now using a hand blender. I use a bar mix for this, and to avoid getting extra air bubbles, you can tilt the pitcher like this and put the blender down at an angle, because in that way you will get less air bubbles. So at an angle, and once it's tilted, you can kind of make it stable or like straight like this. You should blend until you can see it started to get this like even more shiny and like glossy surface. So for me, I can see right now it's like this. So it's almost done. I'm just gonna give it a bit more to make sure it's all covered. Now I can see this very glossy, perfect texture. You can see here, super shiny, glossy, beautiful cremeux cream, which is exactly what we want. The cremeux needs to set in the fridge before we can actually use it. You can do it during the day, but I do prefer to do it overnight to make sure that it's fully cold. But if you want to do it very early in the day, it needs to be in the fridge for at least 6 hours, I would say. But again, if you want to be fully sure that it's set like it should, it has to set overnight. So I'm just going to pour it into this plastic box. And lastly, we're gonna put some cling film on top while it's set in the fridge. Just make sure it covers the surface. I'm now putting the cremeux in the fridge, and then it's ready to be piped on pastries tomorrow. Look at this beautiful cremeux that has the creamiest texture you can imagine. It's super smooth, shiny and glossy. To pipe the cremeux on top of the cakes, I am going to use 2 different pastry tips. This one is a pillow tip, Wilton M125. But you can use whatever pastry tips you have depending on the pattern you would like. And I will also be using this open star tip that is similar to a 4B pastry tip from Wilton. This smooth texture makes the cremeux perfect for piping, so to be used on top of cakes, as fillings in macarons, or as an insert inside an entremet cake. It really has the most velvety consistency that just melts on the tongue. It is so delicious. So this is how you make the perfect chocolate cremeux that works every time. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. And if you like this video and would like to see more recipes and tutorials and how-to guides, make sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments what to bake next time.